Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Callie and today I'm doing my September wrap up. For September, I read a total of 20 books. I DNF'd one and one of those 20 books was an audiobook. So, because I have so many, which I believe this was only one less than August, which has still been my best month thus far, I'm going to jump right into it. So like every month, I like to start it off with a reread and finishing a series. And for the month of September, that was Criers War and Ironheart by Nina Varela. Criers War follows this post-apocalyptic world where the robots, I think they're called Ottomans in this series, they won. So all of those sci-fi movies where with like Terminator and all that, where the robots lost. The robots won in this one. So we are following the now princess of this kingdom, who is a Ottoman. And we are following a girl hell-bent on revenge against the Ottomans for murdering her family. I remember really loving book one, and through my reread, I still loved book one. It was filled with so many questions about what makes a human human, and why did humanity fail? And it really opened up your mind to all these kinds of futuristic questions. And I love when a book like that makes you think. So I stuck with the original rating for Criers War at 4 stars. With Ironheart, I really enjoyed this. I think for a duology, this series was done really well. We still kept up that same feeling of what makes humanity. All those questions came over into this book, which was really well done. A lot of books that try and have that same message will lose it in sequels, and this one did not lose that sense of what makes humanity humanity, and I really liked that. I will say for a duology, I felt like the climax of the story was relatively anticlimactic and very quick. I had to reread the chapter where all the big things happened because I feel like I missed it. So it was a bit anticlimactic. I did really like the ending. I think this is a solid duology for sci-fi and fantasy lovers. I really liked it. It did have a good solid ending. Most of the loose ends were tied up. There are still a couple of lingering questions, but I feel like the author did that on purpose to keep this world open because this world still has a lot of things that need to be done. But overall, I gave this book 4 stars. The next book that I read was Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. This is a historical romance set in the early 1900s. No. This is set in 1879, where a small suffragette group of women are coming together and they're trying to get backers for this movement. And our main character ends up going to this very cold and icy duke who has just escaped a scandal of divorce. And our romance kind of goes on from there. I really liked it. I wasn't expecting to like a historical romance as much as I did, but I really liked the characters. Annabelle was such a strong character, especially for this time period. She had that great mixture of the etiquette of the time while also speaking her mind. And I loved that. And what I loved about Sebastian, our Duke, is he actually had human emotions. And that was portrayed really, really well within this story. Along with the romance, the subplots were all really well done. Nothing overshadowed each other. And it was a very enjoyable read. So I ended up giving this 5 stars. Up next, I am continuing with the Queen of Hearts trilogy by Colleen Oakes. So I picked up the second book, which is Blood of Wonderland. Now, I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I just feel like this had second book syndrome. It's so hard. I see the build-up and what this book was trying to do, but it was so anticlimactic. I was bored most of the book, and I really want to see where that setup goes. We have a lot of character development. We're starting to see that Queen of Hearts we know kind of come out, and we're starting to understand her a lot more. And I really like the character development in this. However, the plot development is not so great. So yeah, I ended up just keeping this one at 3 stars. Up next, another series I am continuing, which is the Origin series by Jennifer Armentrout. I picked up The Burning Shadow. And this is the second book after The Darkest Star. And in this series, we are following Evie, who This is following, I never read the original Lux series, which follows an alien invasion where Lux are kind of like humans, but a little bit more, I don't want to say magical, but their senses are heightened, they're faster, that kind of thing. And this is 7 years after the invasion where the Lux have integrated into society. Not well, but have integrated. So this series is following Evie as she starts to meet these Lux and start to understand where they are in society and all of the awful things that are happening to them, and along with a romance, because it is a JLA book. I love this series. It's so weird because it's very alien, and I don't know, I feel like I don't see a lot of good alien books. But this one's not little green men in suits. They look like humans and they're people. They are given that. JLA is very good at developing characters and making you care about them. And she does that flawlessly with Burning Shadow. I do feel like a lot of our questions from book 1 were answered in this. However, more questions sprung up, which is expected. I'm unhappy about it, but I get it. But the world really cracked wide open with this book, and I love it when a book does that. I was never bored. This does not have any semblance of second book syndrome. I really enjoyed it. I am super pumped for the finale of this book, which I will be getting to later in October. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. Up next, I picked up I think this is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series by Shauna McGuire, which is Come Tumbling Down. In this series, we're following a bunch of different kids who have been spit back out of these Narnia-esque worlds. Now, Come Tumbling Down so far is probably my least favorite. I feel like this didn't hold the same magic as the other ones, whereas in all the other books, we are revisiting characters that we saw in book 1. However, in this one, we're revisiting a revisit. So we keep visiting Jack and Jill, which we meet in book 1. I don't get the same magic. I like Jack and Jill, but I really thought their story ended in Among the Sticks, the one with Sticks and Bones, that one. I think that one was book 2 or 3. I don't remember. Down Among the Sticks and Bones, that one. I thought that their story had a great finality to it, and we were just going to keep revisiting other students. But we keep coming back to Jack and Jill, and I'm getting bored. This one just didn't have that same dark, I mean, it is dark, but it just didn't give me the same feeling as all the other books did. So I ended up only giving this one 3 stars. Next, I picked up The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. I loved this book so much. This book, we are set in a prison in this fantasy world where anyone can be shooed to prison, just anybody. So we're following our main character, who is basically she's the prison healer, hence the title. And she has been in this prison since she was 8 or 9. And when the rebel queen is basically brought into this prison, she is on the brink of death. And the higher up, they're telling our main character, Kova, to don't let her die. We want her to die on our terms. And then there are these trials where, because Kova is the healer, she is sent in as a proxy because the queen is kind of in a coma. And so Kova has to do these trials, which are awful. The magic system is extremely limited in this world to the royal family. So Kova has no magic. And it was wild. The setting of the prison was phenomenal. The twists and turns. The last page of this book, I physically gasped. I was not ready for the plot twist, even a little. There was a couple things I did see predicted, but I feel like we're supposed to predict those things because she's setting up for this big twist. And boy, did it just deliver. The characters are fantastic in this. Even the side characters, I fell in love with these people. And Kova is such a great character. She has this very headstrong will about her that a lot of YA does, but hers it hits a little different, and I loved it. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. Up next, I picked up The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan. This is a sci-fi series where a girl wakes up on an island and all she knows is she has to find her sister. That's what I went into this book knowing. I did not like this book even a little. It was so weird and confusing. We have this dual perspective. We have the girl on the island and her sister. And when we're following her sister, we're following this mystery of her sister's disappearance. And the plot twist was just even more confusing. And this world it's dying because of global warming and because people don't recycle, and that was the whole message. But I don't feel like it delivered enough. The characters, I didn't give a flying shit about either of these characters. Did not care. Even a little. I feel like with a book like this, you have to be able to care for these characters, and I just don't feel like that was built up enough for me to care. And I think that's what made this fall really flat. I ended up giving this 2.5 stars. Up next was my one DNF this month, or last month. It's last month at this point. And that is Throne of Fire by Riordan. This is the second book in the Kane Chronicles, which is Percy Jackson, but with Egyptian mythology. I hated the narration of this book. You're following two kids, which is fine, but it's told in a set of tape recordings, which was fine in book one. It was okay. It kind of got annoying, but as I kept reading this book, I just couldn't get over how annoying the voices were. And I had to put it down. I didn't care enough about the siblings to want to continue the book, so I decided to DNF this series, unfortunately. Next, I ended up picking up Roar by Cora Carmack. I have been staring at this book for ages, and I know that this is a very underrated YA fantasy, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. In this story, we're following a princess in this world based off of storms. Storms have magic, and different types of magic depending on the type of storm, which is so cool. And in the royal family, they're able to harvest the core or the heart of a storm and use that magic to protect their city from other storms. But our main character, Aurora, has no magic, and she decides to run away to try and learn the magic of storms to see if her magic will come about. Now, the plot of this was mainly Aurora trying to find herself and her place in the world. I feel like we had other plot elements that I can see that are going to be coming up in the next two books, kind of rotating around her. And I think that this was done really, really well because we were building up the characters so much, where once we have that set up, the real plot can start. It is very much how Throne of Glass sets up Selena, Dorian, and Kale for all of the other books in the series. I felt that really a lot in this book. And I love those kinds of character-driven stories, but we still have plot elements going on kind of in the background, and they don't come forward until later. And I'm really excited to see where that's going. Now, my favorite part of this, besides the character development and all of that, was the magic. The magic of storms was really cool because it had this almost storm chaser feel to it, which was so cool and just a wild ride. I loved the storms and all of that fun stuff that went along with it. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars. So I forgot, I had 2 rereads this in September. I finished my audio book of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I had finished Throne of Glass in August, so I'm not quite ready to dive right back into Crescent City in preparation for the second book yet. I think I'll do a reread, or I'm gonna listen to that in January as that book comes out in February. So I have just enough time to reread A Court of Thorns and Roses. I really want to reread Silver Flames, try and actually figure out, Sarah J. Maas said it's obvious who our next characters are that we're going to be following. I didn't catch it. I also sped read through that book in a day because I needed answers and I was afraid of getting spoiled. So naturally, even though I just want to kind of reread Silver Flames, I have to reread the entire series. And every time I go back to book 1, I see so many things. If you've read this series, you understand what I'm talking about. I love this series. Book 1 used to be my favorite. It's not anymore. Fear not. But I always love re-listening. If you have a chance to listen to the audiobooks, I highly recommend them. They're fantastic. Up next, I finished the duology The Glass Spar by reading The Cursed Sea by Lauren DeStefano. This follows a very steampunk world where a princess of 6 brothers, so she is known as the spare heir. She ends up getting this power to turn living things into gemstones, and when she turns the wrong person, into a gemstone, she has to go on the run. And that's where our first book goes. We meet a bunch of really cool characters. The magic is really cool. The curse and all of the gemstone stuff is fantastic. Now with the Cursed Sea, I think for a finale in a duology, this did really well of tying up loose ends, plowing through our plot, and answering so many questions we had from book 1. Now, I feel like she didn't use her magic at all in this, which her magic is just uber powerful, that felt like almost a cop-out that she just didn't use. We didn't get to see that really cool stuff that we saw in the Glass Spare, which was really unfortunate because I thought it was really cool. But with that, we did get way more history on this kingdom and the kingdom they're warring against. We get so much of that history. And I love getting lore. I love getting the history and lore within stories. I think it's really cool how the author can build that up and has this huge thing of history for her world. And I love reading about that. And this gave us all of that, and I really enjoyed it. So I ended up giving this only 3.5 stars, but I would highly recommend this duology. I think it's really well done and a really unique concept. The next book was Sarah's pick for me for the month of September, which was Heartstoppers Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. This is a graphic novel following 2 high school students. One is out as gay and the other is this big rugby player. Our big rugby player starts to have feelings for Charlie as their friendship grows and they just start to get closer. And it is just such a heartfelt story. I gave it 5 stars. It was so sweet and adorable, and I bought all the other books already and have read the second book already because they're just so darn adorable. I love them. In this series, we're following 2 girls. We are following Eris, who is a rebel in this world. This world is run by gods, which are basically genetically modified robot human hybrids. I'm still a little fuzzy on that one. I think we'll get more on that in the next book. And then we are following Sona, who is a cybernetically enhanced pilot who then defects and wants to become a rebel, which is unheard of. So these 2 girls are trying to work together to bring down the society that they are trapped in. And there's a lot of really cool mechanics, and they're Gearbreakers. So they do what exactly that title says, is they find the gears within these pilots and these robots to break them down. And now that they have Sona, they can almost get a backdoor pass into this world to better their rebellion. I will say the plot itself was really flat. This was really politic and rebellion heavy, but I don't feel like they were set up enough for a good plot. And it fell really flat, and I had a hard time figuring out what was going on. It jumped a lot, so the pacing was also really off for me. And those 2 mixed together made it a really difficult book for me to actually trudge through. I do really like the world that's set up, and I do really want to get more of it. I just feel it, and I believe this is a debut, so I really want to continue this series when the next book comes out. But I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. Up next, I picked up A Deal with the Elf King by Elise Kova. I picked this up because Sarah and I are actually going to a Polycon next summer, and Elise Kova is going to be there, and I really have been wanting to read her books, and going to a Polycon and she's going to be there is a good incentive to start reading her books because I know she has a ton of them. So I picked up Deal with the Elf King, which I adored. This is just a great fae romance. The way this world is set up is the fae only come and visit the humans to kill them or to find a bride, and our main character Luella is chosen to be a bride, and as she goes into the world of the fae, she has to figure out why they have to have a human queen and if she can go home. And as she's doing that, a lot of other things happen, and I loved that. We have a great romance, a great build up to that, and a great plot. I just heavily enjoyed this series. It was fun, it was whimsical, it was very romantic, and just overall just an enjoyable read. I ended up giving this 4 stars. Next, I am still continuing the Immortals series by Tamora Pierce, and I read Emperor Mage. This is so far my least favorite of the series. I don't feel like anything happened. until the very end. The very end is where just things just blew up at our climax. And the climax was fantastic and what saved this book for me. But the rest of it, I think the climax was what, the last 50 pages? The rest of it was just so boring. I had to just power through this book. I gave it 3 stars. Like, now that the climax has happened, I'm super excited for the final book. But I feel like this climax should have happened in the last book, because the climax of that one wasn't great. But the rest of that one was good. I don't know. It was just so weird. And it's an interesting book series that I am relatively enjoying. But so far, Emperor Mage is my least favorite of the quartet. Up next, I picked up The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This is a story written in verse. A young man trying to understand who he is, and then he finds drag. And I love watching drag. I've gone to live shows all throughout college. I love RuPaul's Drag Race. I really like the community of drag and what it represents. And this book was very, very powerful. It touched on so many things on what it means to be a drag queen, what it means to be gay, what it means to own up to all of these things. And I think that with the poetry within this story, it was told beautifully. And I ended up giving this 5 stars. It is a fantastic book, and I would highly recommend it to anyone. Around this time in September was right when we met Bridget Kemmer. And I really wanted to read more of her contemporary books, so I picked up Letters to the Lost by Bridget Kemmer. And this story is about 2 characters, one who has just lost her mom, and the other who is still dealing with the grief of losing his sister, and they find each other through these letters in a graveyard. And they go back and forth between wanting to know who each other is, and not. And these letters, which end up turning into emails, are anonymous until the climax of the book. And it was just so beautiful. I loved this. It was a very good representation of grief and losing a loved one, and at least I think so. And overall, I gave this book 5 stars. It was just a beautiful, powerful book. It is very heavy. Overall, fell in love with this story and the characters within it. After the heaviness of that book, I needed a light book. So I picked up Barbarian Lover by Ruby Dixon, which is the 3rd book in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. And the first book is still my favorite, but this one comes as a close second. We're following another girl as she realizes the other aliens are coming back for them. And she feels that she is a danger to this new society that they're building. And she tries to run away, but one of the barbarians follows her. And our story goes on from there. This one actually had plot like the first book, so I enjoyed it. And I ended up giving this 4 stars. I don't know why I do this to myself, but I like to jump from very, very heavy to very, very light to apparently very, very heavy. So I picked up another Bridget Kemmerer book. I picked up More Than We Can Tell, which is actually, as I learned, kind of a sequel to Letters to the Lost. We're following 2 other characters that we meet in that book, in this book. Now, this book, opposed to dealing with grief and the losing of someone, this deals with trauma and how trauma can affect you in the long run. And I really enjoyed that. We are following 2 characters, Rev and Emma. Rev we meet in Letters to the Lost, who is in a foster care situation that he has been adopted into, but his father starts to come back into his life, and his father was extremely abusive, and we watch Rev try and come to terms with that. And then we follow Emma, who yearns to be just like her father and be this big gaming software engineer, but then she starts getting these really hateful comments within the gaming world that turn out to be really, really dangerous. And Rev and Emma find each other and sort of confide in each other until they each find their breaking point. And I loved this book. It was so well done and beautiful, just like Letters to the Lost. I loved it. I sobbed through most of it. And it was a fantastic story. I gave this one 5 stars as well. So the last 2 books are much lighter than the other 2 that I have read. And I finished the Hot and Hammered series by Tessa Bailey, starting with Love Her or Lose Her, which we are following the married couple as they start to realize that their marriage isn't as perfect as everyone thinks, and they try and fix their marriage. I really like this one. I think I think book 1 out of all 3 of these is my favorite, but Love Her or Lose Her definitely comes as a close second. It was just as hot and steamy as book 1. It was really fun. It did get really, not really heavy, but it did get a little heavy with the marriage aspect of the story and understanding the compromises and everything that comes with being in a marriage. Now, I've only been married 11 months, but I did feel that within this story. So I did really enjoy this, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. After that, I picked up Tools of Engagement, which is the final book in the Hot and Hammered series. This is probably my least favorite. I feel like this one, we have 2 major plot points for each of our main couple. They each have their own plot point, but I feel like they are such big things that are happening that they overshadow each other and not enough gets enough page time. So they both fell a little flat, or at some points one was overpowering the other, and it didn't have a lot of balance to it. So this one was probably my least favorite. The steamy parts were great. Tessa Bailey is a fantastic romance writer. I just think with how much I came to care about these characters over the 3 books, this one just fell a little bit flat for me. And these are all the books that I have read in the month of September. I read a lot, and I had a lot of 5 stars this month. I think this is the most 5 stars I've ever had during a reading month. So I know this video has been a bit long. I've been talking for a while, and that's going to be it for today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Let me know down below in the comments what you read in the month of September, and I will see you guys in our next video. Bye!